of Nationwide at 5 here inside the cover story. It's Must Listen Radio right here on Nationwide at 90 FM. And of course, on the cover story today, we will be focusing on the Auditor General's report on the government of Jamaica's hurricane response after the passage of Melissa. We will be having as a guest Minister of Energy, Transport and Telecommunications, Darrell Vaz. Now, the Portfolio Minister is reading the suggestions of wrongdoing for what he says were justifiable actions taken in the purchase of Starlink devices during the government's response to Hurricane Melissa. Minister Vaz's response follows a report from the Auditor General, Pamela Monroe Ellis, alleging he breached the Public Procurement Act in purchasing 200 Starlink units without following the appropriate processes. But an unrepentant Vaz says he would do it again. The Auditor General found that the purchase was initiated by the instruction of the Energy and Telecommunications Minister rather than by the head of the procuring entity. This, she says, was contrary to the Public Procurement Act. The devices were also delivered on November 14 before procurement documentation was completed, with key forms prepared retroactively on November 19 to regularize the transaction. Auditors also found that many of the Starlink devices procured were not used. Physical inspections conducted at 8 entities revealed that all 41 issued devices remained unused and in storage. Additionally, 5 entities did not record the Starlink devices in their asset inventories, and 3 municipal corporations reported that the devices had not been entered into municipal inventory listings, but were issued directly to the respective councillors. A further inspection of 41 devices observed that all units were equipped with European 2-pin electrical plugs requiring adapters for use. Mrs. Monroe Ellis says, as of January 6, 2026, 80 out of 200 Starlink devices remained in storage at the Jamaica Constabulary Force, JCF. Minister Vaz, the Portfolio Minister, he joins us to respond to these findings. Top of the afternoon to you, Minister. Welcome once again to Nationwide at 5.
Afternoon to you and your listeners.
All right, Minister, I'll just give you the floor to just give us an opening response to what the Auditor General has found. You said you'd do it again. Why is your stance so strident, Minister?
All right, so it's important that we just take a step back, okay? When Melissa hit Jamaica, it was Starlink that saved the day in terms of our ability to respond in the way that we did, by virtue of the fact that between Starlink, USA, and humanitarian agencies that came to Jamaica to help us, they issued over 900 terminals, which were used by both government and humanitarian agencies. Obviously, that was huge because communication is the and in a few short weeks, there were over 520,000 cell phones that used Starlink devices to communicate in areas disrupted by the hurricane. So, bottom line is, not to mention the over 1.8 million text messages that people in the affected areas and government responders were able to use as a method of communication. So what did that do? That left gaps, because once that Starlink was made public, a number of government entities, NGOs and others, ministry agencies, police, army, everybody realized that Starlink was necessary for them to be able to respond in the best way possible. So I started to become bombarded with calls and messages and letters requesting Starlink. As Minister of Telecommunications and also co-chairman of the Cabinet Subcommittee, I thought it prudent to initiate to see whether or not we could get additional Starlinks specifically for the Melissa relief, not for anything outside of Melissa relief. Starlink by that time had sold over 35,000 Starlinks into Jamaica. So they were not in a position to supply. All of the stocks in Jamaica were completely depleted. And I was able to find, through my ministry, one supplier who had a shipment of 200 coming in, or 250, for which I initiated with Aud G to procure them. Now, let me make it clear. I could, as Minister of Telecommunications and the Minister responsible for Met, I could have done that internally in my ministry, you know. But I didn't, because I knew what the purpose was, and I knew that the legal entity to handle response in Jamaica for any disaster is with the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management. Hence, why I went that route. So, between the permanent secretary in OPM, and the Director General in OPM, that process was handled. Bottom line is, that is simply what transpired, and the bottom line is that, as I said before, the only person that advises the government of Jamaica is the Attorney General's chambers, for which I have furnished you with their letter, both the letter from OPM to them and their response as it relates to emergency procurement in a disaster. And it clearly states that it can be done the way it was done without any breaches. So I want to make it very clear that the advice given to the government of Jamaica through any ministerial agency is that of the Attorney General's chambers and not of any other entity. So as far as I'm concerned, we have been cleared by virtue of the documentation that I have provided to the media that we complied with exactly what was stipulated in the Attorney General's comments. It's too long for me to read it, but I'm sure at some point you will read it. The last point I want to make, we were in charge of the distribution. It was made clear that the units would have to be subscribed and maintained and paid monthly costs by the receiving entities. So once it came out of the Office of the Commissioner of Police, yes, that's where our duty ended. So I cannot answer for ones that are not in use, because I indicated to them from day one that they need to be subscribed when the subscription completed, and also to maintain the monthly payments. So I also want to make that very clear.
We're almost up on the break, but for the benefit of our listeners, you've heard Darrell Vaz, the Minister of Technology, say that he has provided documentation. We are in receipt of, and I've read through them. A letter was written by the permanent secretary in the ministry of, in the office of the Prime Minister, pardon me, that's Ambassador Rocky Mead, to the Attorney General's chambers on November 10, 2025. And also we are in receipt of a response from the Solicitor General in the Attorney General's chambers, Mrs. Marlene Aldred, to the permanent secretary in the office of the Prime Minister, And the third piece of documentation provided by Minister Vaz is a guidance note from the Ministry of the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service, its Office of Public Procurement Policy. Yes, so a guidance note from the Ministry of Finance, its Office of Public Procurement Policy. So all three outline the mechanisms, legal mechanisms that are already in place to facilitate acquiring goods and services during times of emergency. All right, so we needed to set that stage. We are in receipt of those. We've read them, and when we come back, we have some tough questions for the minister. But we take the break and come live inside the cover story right here on Nationwide at 5. We're talking about the Auditor General's report into the government's response in the aftermath of Hurricane Melissa. I misidentified the minister who we have with us, that's Daryl Vaz, before we went to the break. I said technology minister. That was perhaps some time ago. He's Minister of Energy, Transport, and Telecommunications. Before I bowl the question to you, I just want to read just a line or two from the documentation that we're looking at, which says that the rules regarding procurement are relaxed during emergency situations. Let me put it like that. In this letter from the Attorney General's Chambers, written by the Solicitor General, it says, paragraph 1, subsection U of Part A of the first schedule provides, quote, the procurement methods and processes set out in parts 3 and 5 do not apply to the following goods, works, and services. And U reads, goods, works, and services required during a situation of emergency or extreme urgency, notice in relation to the acquisition of which is published in accordance with paragraph 3. So the laws are clear. The procurement methods and processes set out in parts 3 and 5 do not apply to the following goods, works, and services. Goods, works, and services, required during a situation of emergency or extreme urgency. Notice in relation to the acquisition of which is published in accordance with paragraph 3. So Minister, it's clear what the law says about the procurement rules in a time of emergency. However, the Auditor General made a particular finding, which is what I want you to respond to, that the procurement of these 200 Starlink devices was initiated by your instruction, is the claim, not by ODPEM's Director General, which contravenes the Public Procurement Act. Why is this the case, and why did you issue that instruction, and do you accept that it's in breach of the laws?
I issued that instruction in my position as the Minister of Telecommunications and also that of the co-chair of the Cabinet Committee for the Melissa Recovery. So that in itself gave me two hats. They weren't going, nobody was calling ODPEM about Starlink. They were calling my ministry and calling me because I was the one who was on the ground coordinating with Starlink and the humanitarian aid companies in Jamaica on the ground in terms of the Starlinks that were given to us free of cost by Starlink and other humanitarian agencies. So that automatically put me as the person who the ministries and agencies and other NGOs contacted expressing their difficulties in responding effectively and efficiently and timely because of the lack of communication. Secondly, we were in the midst of trying to get normality back in some areas. So the ABMs could not function without Starlink. So the Bankers Association were in touch with me. The Ministry of Labor was in touch with me because their field officers didn't have enough Starlinks to be able to do the assessments, the police stations, all of the emergency services that the government had were under pressure because of the lack of communication. But let's go one step further. The political directorate was on me, led by the leader of the opposition, that his councillors and his members of parliament were helpless because when they went in their constituencies, they had no communication to communicate with the responding agencies or their constituents. All members of parliament in the affected area were given a Starlink out of those 200 Starlink. All mayors, all councillors on both sides were given Starlinks through the municipal corporations. The municipal corporations, which is responsible for the response in the parishes. Their buildings did not have Starlink. So
Minister Vaz, I think it's impatient of debate, Minister Vaz, the situation that existed on the ground that would have necessitated the need for the devices. But the Auditor General is being specific here, and based on the documentation, one second, let me get the question out. Based on the documentation that you have provided, it's the guidance is to all government of Jamaica procuring entities, yes? That includes ministries, departments, executive agencies, or other agencies of government, a public body, a local authority, any other body that is the recipient of public funds and duly authorized to apply those funds to public procurement. The argument the Auditor General is positing here is that the minister, it has no such authority, whether ordinarily or under emergency circumstances. Do you accept that that is a fact?
No, I don't. And let me tell you why I don't. I don't because although ODPEM does not fall under me, it used to fall under local government and it went to the office of the Prime Minister. Yes? By virtue of my appointment as co-chair of the Cabinet Subcommittee of the Melissa Recovery, that gives me authority and autonomy to speak directly to the Permanent Secretary in OPM and also the Director General in OPM wearing my hat as co-chair. So it's not just the Minister of Telecommunications that pick up the phone and call the Permanent Secretary. I'm using my position given to me by the Cabinet of Jamaica, named by the Prime Minister of Jamaica, and therefore I find that to be, in other words, what would I call it? A distraction? The fact is that the
So you asked the OPM head to make contact, is that what you did?
No, let me finish. When I initiated it to the Permanent Secretary and Director General, if they thought that it was unnecessary, they thought that it was not value for money, or whatever they thought that they would have disagreed with me advising on the purchase of 200 Starlinks, the matter would have ended. But they supported it because they understood, being in the seat that they are, the challenges that we're having out there in communication and the responsibility of the government to have a coordinated, well-coordinated, decisive response to the hardships of those hundreds of thousands of people down there. So
absolutely, Minister. And I'm asking you, what I'm really asking you to tell me, and you're giving us bits and pieces of it. You're saying all you did was to speak directly to the heads of these various entities and advise them to go the route of Starlink. That's all you did.
That's as simple as it is, and give them the information that I collated as to where they would be available for them to be able to execute the documentation and whatever else. But
and then they were the ones who actioned it.
Let me finish here.
They were the ones who, I want to be clear, Minister. So you spoke to them in your capacity as the co-chair, and you spoke to the Permanent Secretary and the Director General, and they actioned it. It wasn't, you did not make contact with Starlink and initiate a procurement process.
Absolutely not. As a matter of fact, the fact of the matter is that Starlink was unable to assist because they already have 1,900 Starlink customers that can't get subscription because of the overwhelming response to the hurricane for Starlink units. So this is not something that you go and you can go to 5 different shops and buy over the counter. This was just a situation that landed us in a position where there was a supplier who had a shipment, not specific for us, that was coming in the timeline that we needed it because of the fact that obviously we were in a state of emergency.
I'm also hearing that you're disagreeing with the characterization then that you initiated the procurement. You're saying you did not do that.
Listen, that is major in the minors. Everything that happened with Starlink came through me from the day one, from the hurricane hit. All communication with Starlink International, they sent people down here, and that I was a point person as Minister of Telecommunications. The bottom line is my ministry did not do the procurement, and that's where I think I would have had a problem, which is why I went the route of Aud G, because they are the body in law responsible for the response to emergency disasters.
Procuring, so they function as the procuring entity.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So the legal advice or the technical advice, because we do see that the government sought legal advice, and it is in your estimation, you're saying you're of the view that your actions fell within the ambit of the legal advice provided by the Attorney General's chamber.
110%. And I go further. Extreme times require effective, decisive, and timely interventions. This is not just an ordinary situation. This is people's lives. This is people that don't have food to eat, don't have a roof over their head. And the only thing that can get that to happen in the shortest possible time is a government that has good communications to have a joined up approach. And that is what has happened.
We're almost out of time, Minister. We know that the rules are relaxed to facilitate emergency circumstances. Do you think the rules should be further relaxed to allow ministers to initiate procurement in cases of emergency? Do you believe that?
No, I don't. And I don't see it necessary, because you already have the mechanism and the structure in your ministry or through Aud G to do exactly what they did. So the fact of the matter is that absolutely there is a system there and it works. A disaster was declared, a disaster order was promulgated, and that gave what was allowed to happen in the shortest possible time, because it simply means that the procurement process was suspended based on the disaster order. That's what it means. That's what it means in real English, real life English. When you cut away all the legalities and everything, right? It gives the opportunity to procure anything that he sees necessary for the emergency. In the short time.
We have to leave it there, Minister. Thank you so much for coming on. And we have a lot of respect for you here at Nationwide, because you don't hide from the questions. You face them. So thanks for coming, Minister. We appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your evening. We have to leave it there.
God forbid we have another disaster when I'm around. I'll operate the same way. The interests of the people are first and foremost on my mind and my government's mind. And we do things in an efficient, effective way. And that's what I think causes the big problem. Yeah?
We have to leave it there, Minister. Thanks so much again. I appreciate it. The voice there of Darrell Vaz. He's the Minister of Energy, Transport, and Telecommunications. This has been the cover story. The headlines are next.